There's a good chance you've heard of Red Faction before, because it's been out for a while already for the PlayStation 2. This review is of the new PC version. It's pretty much the same game. It's a first-person shooter that takes place on Mars. The plot of the game is similar to the Paul Verhoeven film Total Recall. It's sort of a big Martian rebellion against a horrible totalitarian company, and where you get to take up arms against these evil corporate lackeys. The main difference between the PC version and the PlayStation 2 version is that the PC version runs at higher resolution. It also adds more multiplayer features, including a 32-player mode that supports deathmatch and team deathmatch and capture the flag modes of play, and has plenty of maps for any of these. Otherwise, it's pretty much identical to the game that was released in May for the PlayStation 2. The difference is, on the PC, Red Faction has a lot of stiff competition it needs to compete against, and in that case, it's going to have a harder time trying to distinguish itself, because the game's sci-fi theme and its various weapons and its enemies and its level design are all rather typical of the shooter genre. So depending on how many other shooters you've played in the past, games like Half-Life and Unreal Tournament and Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, among plenty of others, if you're already used to games like this, then you'll find that Red Faction for the PC offers a lot of the same territory. The game does have a lot of its own unique features, and it's questionable whether these really distinguish it from other shooters that have come before it, but they're certainly worth mentioning. The highly touted geomod system, as the developers' volition call it, it basically lets you blow holes through the environment, which you normally can't do in other games. Other games let you shoot bullet holes into walls and stuff. Well, this lets you blow up the walls completely in certain specific areas. So you can get your big rocket launcher, and you might come up against a locked door or something, and rather than try to find a key for it, and actually you rarely have to find keys in Red Faction, instead you can just send a few rockets into like the cavern wall next to the door, and that'll create a nice little opening for you. It's a pretty nice effect, and it's used with surprising restraint in the game. It's actually used quite rarely. It figures more prominently into some of the multiplayer maps, actually, such as in the Capture the Flag levels, where you have your two team bases on either side, and rather than have to navigate a bunch of corridors to get to the opposing team's flag, you can just sort of take your giant rocket launcher once again and kind of cut a path. So that's a rather interesting element. In addition to that, Red Faction lets you commandeer 5 different vehicles, and these look quite cool. They kind of run the sci-fi gamut from kind of armored personnel carriers and like drilling vehicles, all the way on up to like submarines and flying cars, all armed with various weapons and so on. And you see the view from the perspective of these different vehicles when you're in them. It's not that complex of a simulation, but it's a nice way of breaking up the gameplay through the single-player levels, and it lets you really take care of a lot more bad guys than you normally could. Besides the vehicles, Red Faction has more than a dozen different weapons, including all the mainstays of shooters. You've got pistols and shotguns and sniper rifles and rocket launchers and grenades and a flamethrower and a railgun, and that pretty much covers it. You get a nice clear riot shield that can deflect bullets also. They all have secondary firing modes. You can zoom in with the sniper rifles and so on. All the weapons look good, and they for the most part sound good too. They're a little bit straightforward. You've probably seen them all in other shooters. One problem with the sniping weapons is that your aim stays perfectly steady when you zoom in all the way with them, so the reticle will stay perfectly still, and it makes kind of lining up long-range headshots all too easy. Otherwise, some of the weapons are rather underpowered, such as the shotgun these weapons are like too slow to reload. So you'll find that even though the game has about 15 weapons in it, you'll really come to rely on just a handful of them, and the only time you'll switch to other ones is when you happen to be running low on ammo. The single player levels in Red Faction are pretty diverse in some ways, and then not so much in others. All the sort of Martian, cavernous or corporate environments are again the sort of stuff you've probably seen before in other sci-fi games. On the other hand, there is a fair bit of variety in the gameplay. There's some stealth levels, and you hop in the vehicles and you swim underwater, stuff like that. So it it certainly doesn't get boring, and if anything, it all ends a little too quickly after about 10 hours. So Red Faction isn't a particularly long game either. There's some replay value in that it has multiple difficulty settings and the like. But the levels are scripted pretty tightly, so they'll all be pretty much the same if you attempt them on multiple tries. So altogether, Red Faction is really a very solid shooter. It looks good, it sounds good. The levels are varied. It's got some unique features to it. But on the other hand, if you're sort of expecting a shooter to surprise you, and you've played a lot of other ones, then Red Faction probably won't do the trick for you. And even its multiplayer mode, won't be too drastically different from what you've been accustomed to. It's a perfectly good game to add to your collection if you like shooters in general and don't expect anything from them that you haven't already seen before. And ultimately, it's superior in a lot of ways to the PlayStation 2 version, thanks to its higher resolution graphics and its better multiplayer mode. So it's another good offering from the talented team at Volition Software, who also made games like Free Space 2 and Summoner more recently. It's just a bit unfortunate that it doesn't have the same sort of sense of creativity to it that those other games did. But then again, shooters aren't really a genre particularly known for their creativity, and again, if you don't expect too much out of it, then Red Faction will probably be right up your alley.